"Step aside, old man, or you'll regret it." The words, sharp as splintered glass, pierced the lively morning buzz of Rosie's diner. Officer Miller, young and neatly dressed in a crisp uniform with patience stretched thin, jerked his thumb toward the exit. In front of him stood Arthur Jenkins, 80 years old, each year carved into the deep lines of his face, lines that mapped out long-forgotten battles. Arthur held a weathered $5 bill, his hand unsteady, caught between choosing the blueberry pancakes or the oatmeal special. For 30 seconds he lingered at the register, caught in a tiny storm of indecision, one all too familiar to a man surviving on a fixed income. His faded flannel shirt and mended corduroy trousers stood in stark contrast to the diner's polished chrome and streamlined bustle. Arthur's pale blue eyes, clouded by age, but still flickering with a faint stubbornness, gradually locked onto the impatient officer. He hadn't meant to cause any trouble. He never did. Sometimes the world just spun too fast. Too many choices, too little time. The once comforting aromas of bacon and coffee now pressed on him like a weight, deepening his sense of exposure. All he wanted was to buy breakfast. He opened his mouth, forming a silent apology that never left his lips, just a faint sigh of confusion. The air thickened inside the diner. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations silenced. Comment respective. You believe every person deserves dignity, regardless of their pace. Arthur Jenkins had been a loyal customer at Rosie's for nearly 10 years, ever since Martha passed. The diner was a tether to the world for him, where the coffee was consistently warm and most waitresses spared a kind word. His modest apartment just blocks away was a quiet space filled with memories and the soft scent of aging books. Arthur had served in the military in his younger days during a war now relegated to history books. Those years were packed away, marked only by a drawer containing a few medals he rarely looked at and a familiar pain in his left knee on cold mornings. His days were simple, a pension-supported routine of morning papers, slow walks to Rosie's, and the park if the sun was out. He was easy to overlook, a background character whose quiet dignity was often mistaken for irrelevance. But today, that quietness crumbled. Officers Miller and Davies had swaggered into the diner, their belts weighed down with gear, a symbol of a world that had outpaced Arthur. They weren't here for breakfast. Mr. Henderson, the diner's owner, had called earlier in the week to report a vagrant allegedly harassing customers, an unfair portrayal of Arthur, who occasionally took a little too long counting change or deciphering the revamped menu. Now Arthur, fumbling at the register, had become their target. "Sir, we need you to move along," Officer Davies said, his tone slightly softer than Miller's, but equally laced with irritation. Though perhaps 5 years older than his partner, Davies matched Miller's dismissive stance. Arthur glanced at the bill in his hand, then at Sarah, the young cashier, who usually greeted him with warmth. But today she seemed uneasy, her gaze flicking nervously between Arthur and the officers. I just need to pay," Arthur murmured, his voice barely louder than the ambient clinking of cutlery. A flush crept up his neck. He despised being a problem. All his life, he had tried not to be from Korea's rice paddies to his hometown sidewalks. Miller scoffed, a harsh snort. "Pay for what, Grandpa? Your nap? This is a business. People are waiting." He waved a hand toward the two people behind Arthur, who shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, cowed by the officer's presence. Arthur's calm and humble demeanor was misread, mistaken for stubbornness or senility. The idea that he carried a story worth knowing didn't cross their minds. To them, he was an obstacle, an inconvenience on their morning beat. I said, "Move it." Miller's voice cracked like a whip, louder now, drawing stares from nearby tables. Some faces showed disapproval. Others watched with cold curiosity. Arthur flinched. His shoulders hunched instinctively, a defensive posture he hadn't used in decades. He wasn't deaf, just slow to register the hostility. His eyes flicked to the overhead menu, its vivid images of eggs and pancakes blurring as if holding some answer to the aggression he faced. Blueberry pancakes? Oatmeal? Simple choices now. Seemed impossible. I forgot what I ordered, he stammered, the admission quiet and vulnerable, a rare exposure of confusion. He hoped it might inspire compassion, but instead it worsened Miller's temper. Forgot? You're holding everyone up because you forgot? Miller stepped in closer, breaching Arthur's personal space. His shadow stretched over the older man. Like a physical burden, the starched uniform and the faint metallic scent of gun oil overwhelmed Arthur's senses. We don't have time for this, old man. Either pay and leave, or we'll remove you. Davies placed a hand on Miller's arm. An empty gesture. Easy, Miller. Let's just... Sir, what did you have? Though meant to de-escalate, Davies' tone still dripped with condescension, more wounding than outright cruelty. Arthur looked at the two officers, young, blank masks of authority. He remembered other young faces long ago, coated in mud and fear, battling in trenches, but never this cold indifference. A flashback intruded, muddied trenches, deafening blasts, the bitter taste of cordite and terror. He blinked, pushing the memory back. Oatmeal, he whispered at last, just oatmeal, and coffee. He reached into his worn leather wallet, aged fingers struggling with the clasp, the $5 bill still in his hand. His slow, deliberate movements aggravated the officers eager to wrap things up. He felt the stares of the diner, suffocating and heavy. He bore it silently, as he had endured so much in life. The wallet finally opened, a few singles, some coins, and a faded photo. Martha smiling. Arthur's eyes softened for a second. A fleeting peace. But Miller, impatient, saw only another delay. Are you paying or daydreaming? His sarcasm sliced through the moment. That's it. You're coming with us. He reached out, grabbing Arthur's arm tightly. Arthur instinctively recoiled, not resisting, just startled and hurt. Miller saw defiance. Resisting, he snapped, ready for confrontation. Before Davies or anyone could react, Miller drew his taser. A tense crackle filled the air. Sarah screamed, "No, don't! He's just an old man!" Too late. Miller fired. Two barbs struck Arthur's chest, dangerously close to his heart. Electricity surged through his frail body. Arthur cried out, a strangled sound of pain and disbelief. His legs collapsed, the $5 bill drifting to the floor like a fallen leaf. He hit the linoleum with a sickening thud. The burnt smell of ozone mingled with bacon and fear. Silence. Then screams. A woman shrieked. Someone shouted, "What did you do? He's just an old man." Mr. Henderson raced out, face pale. Davies looked from Arthur to Miller, doubt finally surfacing. Arthur lay still. Shallow, uneven breaths. His glasses shattered nearby. Rosie's diner, once lively, was now filled with dread. Miller stood over him, taser in hand, chest rising and falling, not from exertion, but from adrenaline and creeping guilt. He was resisting, Miller said, voice loud, defensive. Non-compliant. We followed protocol. He recited the words like a textbook. Sterile, detached. Davies crouched, not to help, but to retrieve the wires. His hands trembled. "Call an ambulance," he told Sarah, who stood frozen, tears rolling, hand over her mouth. Mr. Henderson wrung his hands. "Was that really necessary? He's just old. Sometimes he gets confused." Miller turned on him. He was causing a disturbance. We followed procedure. Step back. His voice. A barricade of blame. Some customers were recording. Others whispered, furious. The mood turned. Arthur moaned, low, pained. His eyes fluttered open, dazed. He tried to rise, but his limbs twitched uncontrollably. Outside, unaware of the chaos inside Hidden Sparks's setting, a black motorcade rolled down Main Street. 3 SUVs, 2 motorcycle escorts, power in motion. Inside the lead vehicle, Governor James Thompson reviewed notes for a nearby town hall. He looked out, spotting flashing lights and a gathering crowd at Rosie's diner. "What's happening over there, Bill?" he asked his chief of staff, Bill Corian. "Some kind of incident. Want to check it out?" Pull over. Let's see if they need help." The SUV slid to a halt just as Miller barked at Arthur again. "Get up. Show's over." A perfect collision of timelines was set to unfold. 6 minutes, from taser to government arrival. The SUV door opened with a soft hiss. Governor Thompson stepped out. Tall, composed, dressed in a sleek Navy suit that radiated authority. His presence instantly quieted the noise. His security team fanned out. Order was about to be restored or rewritten. "What is the situation here, officers?" Governor Thompson's voice was firm, but carried no accusation, his gaze sweeping across the scene. The distressed patrons clustered near the doorway. The pale-faced diner owner, Mr. Henderson, who looked as if he had seen a ghost. And finally, Officers Miller and Davies, struggling to lift a dazed and trembling Arthur Jenkins to his feet. Miller, visibly startled by the unexpected arrival of such a high-ranking official, making an unscheduled stop, stammered, "Governor." Sir? Just a minor disturbance, sir?" This individual was causing a scene, became agitated, resisted arrest. His explanation sounded feeble, even to his own ears. Davies, equally flustered, nodded in agreement, his hand still roughly gripping Arthur's arm, trying to force him upright. Arthur, disoriented and weak, barely noticed the new arrival. He was still struggling to catch his breath. The phantom. Electricity still coursing through his veins, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. His gaze was fixed on the floor, on a small sticky patch of spilled syrup near his worn shoe, a strange point of focus amid the surrounding chaos. Governor Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Arthur. There was something painfully familiar about the old man's stooped posture, the proud yet weary set of his jaw, even in his current distressed and disheveled condition. The governor took a step closer, his sharp eyes scanning Arthur's face, which was pale and etched with pain. Feeling the intense scrutiny of this imposing new figure, Arthur slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, the noisy diner, the agitated crowd, the very air seemed to freeze. A flicker of profound recognition ignited in the governor's eyes, swiftly followed by disbelief, then an awakening, almost sacred respect. Arthur, too, saw something in the governor's face, a look that wasn't pity or condescension, but something entirely different, something he hadn't seen directed at him in a very, very long time. He blinked, a confused frown touching his lips. Did he know this man? The governor's official demeanor softened, transforming into something deeply personal, almost reverent. He took another step forward, his movement decisive, gently but firmly, removing Officer Davies' hand from Arthur's arm. The sudden authoritative gesture left Davies momentarily stunned, his hand dropping to his side. "Arthur," Governor Thompson's voice was low, incredulous, yet filled with a deep, unmistakable respect that resonated through the sudden hush that fell over the scene. "Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, is that really you?" Arthur looked up, truly seeing the governor now, the strong, compassionate face often seen on the evening news. His name, spoken with such familiarity and difference, seemed to pierce the fog of pain and confusion enveloping him. He squinted, his memory a hazy landscape, struggling to place the face in the context. Do I know you, son?" he asked, his voice weak but clear, carrying a natural dignity even the recent assault could not extinguish. Governor Thompson's eyes, usually sharp and analytical from years of political battles and policy debates, betrayed an undeniable emotion. He reached out, not with an authoritative grip, but with a gesture of profound respect, placing a hand gently on Arthur's frail shoulder, a steadying, supportive touch. "You might not remember me, Mr. Jenkins," the governor said, his voice thick with feeling. He turned slightly, his words now addressing the stunned officers and the silent, utterly captivated crowd of diner patrons. "But I, and indeed this entire nation, owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Officers Miller and Davies exchanged bewildered, panicked glances. What on God's earth was happening? This disheveled old man, this public nuisance they had just tasered, This vagrant knew the governor, or rather, the governor knew him and spoke of him in such terms. Officers, Governor Thompson began, his tone shifting dramatically, acquiring a steely edge of command that made both Miller and Davies flinch as if physically struck. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" Miller opened his mouth, then closed it, utterly speechless, his mind racing to comprehend the sudden, catastrophic turn of events. Davies shook his head dumbly, his face ashen. The governor's gaze swept over Arthur again, this time with a mixture of profound sorrow for his current condition and immense, unshakable pride. "This is Arthur Jenkins," he announced, his voice ringing with conviction, each word a hammer blow to the officer's crumbling composure. "Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, recipient of the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during the Battle of Chosin Reservoir. He held the line at Fox Hill against impossible odds, outnumbered 10-1 in sub-zero temperatures, saving his entire company from annihilation, including a young green lieutenant by the name of Frank Peterson." The governor paused, letting the name hang in the air, freighted with significance. "My father." A collective gasp rippled through the diner, a sound of pure shock and dawning comprehension. Sarah, the cashier, covered her mouth, her eyes wide with tears. Mr. Henderson looked as though he might faint, clutching his chest. The color drained completely from Officer Miller's face, leaving it a sickly, ghastly gray. Officer Davies stared at Arthur, his jaw slack, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying, irreversible clarity. This frail, confused old man they had just tasered was a hero, a legendary figure, his father's savior. The man whose photograph, a young soldier in a frozen hell, had sat on his father's desk for 50 years. The silence that followed Governor Thompson's revelation was heavier than any sound the diner had ever known. It pressed down on officers, Miller and Davies, suffocating them with the weight of their monumental, catastrophic misjudgment. Miller's hand, which had reflexively gone to his sidearm when the governor first approached, now hung limply as if all strength and bravado had deserted him. He looked at Arthur Jenkins, truly looked at him for the first time, not as an inconvenience, a nameless, faceless old man, but as the man the governor had just described, a hero, a legend, a figure from the annals of military valor. The faded flannel shirt and patched corduroy trousers suddenly seemed like the humble disguise of a king. The lines on Arthur's face no longer spoke of mere old age and neglect, but of battles fought, hardships endured, and courage that transcended time. Shame, hot and searing, washed over Miller, burning his cheeks and making his ears ring. Davies was no better. His face was a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He kept shifting his gaze from Arthur to the governor and back again, as if hoping this was some terrible mistake, a case of mistaken identity. But the governor's conviction, the raw emotion in his voice, was undeniable. Governor Thompson turned his full attention to the two officers. His earlier warmth reserved for Arthur was gone, replaced by a cold, controlled fury that was far more terrifying than any outburst of rage. "You tasered this man?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet, each word precise and heavy with condemnation. "You tasered Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, a decorated war hero for holding up the line, at a diner?" Miller swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sir, Governor, we didn't know. He appeared old." The governor interrupted, his voice rising slightly, cutting through Miller's feeble excuse. "He appeared frail, perhaps a little slow, a little confused. Is that now grounds for assault by officers of the law in this state? Is that the new standard of policing we aspire to?" His gaze was like ice, pinning them both exactly where they stood. "My father spoke of Sergeant Jenkins until the day he died. He spoke of his courage, his leadership, the men he saved from certain death in the frozen hell of Chosin. He showed." Me a photograph, a grainy old picture of a young man barely out of his teens, covered in grime and frost, but with eyes that burned with an indomitable spirit, eyes I still see in him, despite what you've put him through today." The governor gestured toward Arthur, who was now being gently helped into a chair by a remorseful-looking Mr. Henderson and the young waitress Sarah, who dabbed at Arthur's temple with a damp cloth. "This man," the governor continued, his voice resonating with a profound sorrowful anger, "has endured more hardship, shown more bravery, and sacrificed more for this country and the freedoms we enjoy than you two can possibly comprehend in a lifetime. And you treated him like refuse, like an inconvenience to be swept aside." Miller finally found his voice, a choked whisper. "Governor, I am so profoundly sorry. We had no idea. If we had known, no idea." Thompson cut him off sharply. "That's precisely the problem, officer. You had no idea, and you didn't care to find out. You judged a man by his clothes, by his age, by his momentary confusion, and you acted with inexcusable force and profound disrespect. Is this how you uphold the peace, by attacking the very people who fought to secure it for you?" The shame was palpable, a suffocating cloud in the diner. Davies looked down at his polished boots, unable to meet the governor's accusing stare. The diner patrons watched in stunned, awed silence, witnessing a public dressing down of an intensity rarely seen, a cause, moral reckoning unfolding before their very eyes. The power dynamic had irrevocably, dramatically shifted. The hunters had become the humbled, their authority stripped bare by the weight of truth and the presence of a hero they had grievously wronged. Arthur, now seated in a sturdy wooden chair brought from a nearby table, sipped slowly from a glass of water Sarah had gently pressed into his hand. His own hand still trembled, but less so now, the initial shock beginning to recede, replaced by a weary understanding. He looked tired, profoundly tired, as if the years had suddenly caught up with him all at once. Yet a flicker of his old resilience, the spark the governor had recognized, was returning to his pale blue eyes. He watched the governor, a quiet, almost melancholic understanding dawning on his face. Lieutenant Frank Peterson. He remembered him now, a good kid, scared like they all were, but brave. He hadn't thought of that name, that frozen landscape, in years. Governor Thompson, having delivered his scathing indictment, took a deep, steadying breath, his righteous anger slowly giving way to a weary sadness. He turned back to Arthur, his demeanor softening once more. "Sergeant Jenkins, Arthur, on behalf of the state of which I am governor, and from the bottom of my heart as the son of a man whose life you saved, I apologize for what you endured here today. This is not who we are. This is not what you deserve." Arthur managed a faint, tired smile. "It's all right, son. No real harm done. Just a bit startled. Wasn't expecting all this fuss." His capacity for forgiveness, even now after such an ordeal, was astounding, a testament to the strength of his character. The governor knelt beside Arthur's chair, taking the old veteran's gnarled hand in both of his. The gesture was one of deep humility and respect. "No, Arthur, it's not all right," he said gently but firmly, "but we will make it right." He looked pointedly over his shoulder at Officers Miller and Davies, who stood ramrod straight, their faces pale and etched with a mixture of shame and dread. "You too," the governor commanded, his voice once again crisp with authority, "will report to Captain Henderson at Internal Affairs immediately. And before you do that, you will personally apologize to Sergeant Jenkins properly, and I mean properly." His tone left no room for argument, no possibility of evasion. "And believe me," he added, his voice dropping to a low, serious timbre that carried an unmistakable threat, "there will be a full and thorough review of this incident and of the training and conduct protocols that allowed it to happen. This will not be swept under the rug. This will be a catalyst for change. Miller and Davies mumbled their assent, their earlier arrogance completely shattered. The prospect of facing internal affairs under the direct scrutiny of the governor's office was a grim one. The governor then turned to Mr. Henderson, the diner owner, who was hovering nearby, wringing his hands. "Mr. Henderson, I trust Sergeant Jenkins will eat for free at your establishment for as long as he wishes, and that he will always be treated with the utmost respect by your staff." Henderson, eager to make amends, nodded vigorously, relief and shame working on his face. "Absolutely, Governor. Anything he wants, any time, on the house, forever. I am so terribly sorry, Mr. Jenkins." "So sorry for my part in this?" Arthur waved a dismissive hand, a gesture of weariness rather than magnanimity. "A cup of coffee is all I ever need, mostly." Tension in the diner began to ease, replaced by a wave of complex emotions, relief, sadness, and a profound respect for the old man in their midst. Several patrons discreetly wiped tears from their eyes. The paramedics arrived, alerted by one of the governor's aides, but Arthur, after a quick checkup where he complained more about the fuss than any lingering pain, declined to go to the hospital. He insisted he was fine, just a little shaken, his pride perhaps more bruised than his body. The governor made sure Arthur had his personal number before he prepared to leave, promising to call and check in on him soon, and to arrange a proper meeting under better circumstances. The connection between the two men, forged in the crucible of a past war and rekindled in a moment of present-day injustice, was palpable. The aftermath of that shocking morning at Rosie's diner rippled through the community and beyond, a story carried by news reports and social media, sparking conversations about respect for veterans, police conduct, and the invisible heroes who walk among us. Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, the quiet, unassuming veteran who had sought only a simple breakfast, was no longer invisible. His dignity, so cruelly assaulted in a moment of careless brutality, was restored tenfold in the eyes of his town, and indeed many across the nation. Officers Miller and Davies faced disciplinary action. Reports later confirmed they were assigned to extensive retraining in de-escalation techniques, community policing philosophies, and sensitivity awareness, with a permanent mark placed on their service records, a stark reminder of their failing. Captain Henderson of Internal Affairs, under pressure from the governor's office, conducted a thorough review that led to revised training modules for the entire department. Mr. Henderson, the diner owner, true to his word, not only ensured Arthur never paid for a meal again, but also, after consulting with Arthur, who initially resisted the idea, hung a discreet but dignified plaque near the entrance. This diner proudly honors Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, U.S. Marine Corps, Hero of Chosen. May we always remember to honor those who served and see the hero in everyone. The incident served as a stark, painful reminder that heroes often walk among us cloaked in the quiet anonymity of everyday life. Their sacrifices unheralded, their courage unseen until a moment of crisis or revelation. It underscored that judging by appearances, by age, by the frailty of the human form, can lead to grievous errors and deep, lasting injustices. The true measure of a person is not found in their present circumstances or the crispness of their attire, but in the content of their character, the strength of their spirit, and the quiet courage they carry within from battles fought long ago. This story, born of disrespect, ultimately bloomed into a testament to the enduring value of service and the absolute non-negotiable necessity of treating every individual with respect and compassion, for we never truly know the battles they have fought or the silent sacrifices they have made in the quiet corridors of their lives. One lingering image from that day, an image that made its way into the local paper, was Governor Thompson before re-entering his SUV to finally head to his delayed town hall. He turned back to Arthur, who was now standing a little unsteadily but with a newfound straightness in his spine by the diner door. The governor didn't offer a handshake. instead with all the patrons, his staff, and the chastened diner owner. As witnesses, he drew himself to attention and delivered a slow, perfect, heartfelt salute to the old Marine. Arthur, surprised by the formal gesture, slowly, almost creakily, pushed himself a little straighter in his chair. A ghost of his younger self, the disciplined sergeant, flickered in his pale blue eyes, and he returned a faint, wavering, but undeniably proud salute. The respect so long overdue from some finally given was a balm to an old wound. A quiet victory in a world that had, for a moment, forgotten its heroes. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that honor the unseen and remind us of the enduring power of respect. Type honor if you stand for those who've sacrificed.